Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of Tevora Talks. I am your host, Cash, joined as always by my co-host and partner in cybercrime, Matt Mosley. How are you, sir? Happy Wednesday. We've officially made it to, I guess, half the week. Almost.
Yeah, happy hump day.
Happy hump day. Yep. Uh, with that said, I do want to give a massive shout out. We have a special guest here with us today, one of our esteemed colleagues, Mr. Ben Dimick. He is the solutions guru here at Tevora. He kind of does a little bit of everything with a little bit of everything. So I'm going to pass it to him. Ben, welcome. Welcome to Tevora Talks. Thanks for giving us your time. And yeah, I'll kind of pass it to you. Maybe introduce yourself a little bit. Give us a little bit more idea of what is solutions. What do you do?
Yeah, thanks, Cash. So we're essentially the engineering arm of Tevora. So we tend to focus on more of our efforts that are more technically based than a lot of our other disciplines. So sometimes that's the implementation projects or the real technical deep dives on some of the evaluations and projects that we undertake and so on.
Yeah, awesome. And I kind of chat with you here and there when we bump into each other at the office, and sometimes our paths cross on certain things that come up, alerts and whatnot. And more recently, something that you and I kind of spoke about last week, which really sparked my curiosity and yours as well a little bit, is SSO, right? Single sign-on.
Yeah.
It's a big thing. It's a big advantage to a lot of companies, but we did identify some kind of gap, I kind of want to say, but I guess we'll kind of go into it. But a little shout out to SSO. If you kind of want to pitch it, what is SSO? What are its advantages that you see setting up clients? What are its disadvantages, challenges, roadblocks, etc.? What are your thoughts on it? You've been working around that so long.
Sure. So good questions. Essentially the idea behind single sign-on is that you sign into one system, and that will handle your authentication and access into other systems. It's kind of a gross oversimplification, but that's what it boils down to. In the, I guess I'd say, more common approach now, like for instance, in the past, where you would have seen this most likely in the 90s, would have been stuff like once you've signed in an Active Directory, then Active Directory gives you access to other resources on the network. Whereas now it's usually much more along the lines of I've signed into this single sign-on web-based solution that we have, and then this is giving me access to our other web-based applications. It gives you a lot of advantage and security because you essentially take all of the authentication of, for instance, let's say you're using 10 different cloud apps within an organization, which seems like a very small number for most companies. And you're taking all that authentication functions and you're putting it into one central place. So for instance, someone leaves the company, you can disable their account in that one spot and they've lost access to everything. Or it's very easy to get MFA into place to control access, enforcing strong passwords and password rotation and things like that. The obvious downside is that you have that one access point to that would give folks access to other components from there. So if someone compromised your SSO, they'd have access to all of your stuff. But even within that point, if you're worried in that scenario, you can apply that specifically so that you're using MFA at various access points. So for instance, before you get access to our sensitive data in this one app, we're going to do MFA again, even though you just did it, or we're going to do it if you haven't done MFA in the last 10 minutes or whatever. So there's a lot of ways to secure it, and generally speaking, it's been increasing security and decreasing risk for organizations to get it implemented. It's become very popular. There's I'd say there's very few organizations now that don't use single sign-on in some regard for their cloud applications.
Yeah, and I think it's not to be confused that it's completely replacing Active Directory or anything, right? It
Right.
Still integrates with Active Directory. It's like one, I don't know if I want to say it correctly, one step higher. It's like the eyes in the sky, right? That kind of connect to everything below it in a way.
Yeah, so it's pretty common for Active Directory to be an integration point with single sign-on. So for instance, when we first started doing a lot of web-based SSO, we were using Active Directory as our source for user data. So we're going to pull all the users out of AD, and that's how we're gonna know who has access to the app and they're going to be able to use the same password, and then we're going to use the AD groups to figure out which apps they should have access to, and it'll be great. Going ahead a couple of evolutionary cycles now, what we're seeing more and more often is that the identity platform, which the SSO generally tends to be an important part of, it has evolved to the point where Active Directory is actually now consuming those types of details from your identity platform instead. So, like for instance, in Tevora's case, and with a lot of our clients as well, our users start out in our HR system.
Okay.
Our HR department goes in there. They create them in there. That gets then ingested by our identity platform. The identity platform is then creating the users in Active Directory. So our identity platform and Active Directory have essentially switched roles from where they were previously.
I see. That's pretty interesting. So, I mean, it kind of makes it a lot easier for, I would imagine, HR, right? And the team overall, because they just have to go say, hey, this is a new employee, this is a job function, and boom, everything else kind of gets provisioned, assuming you have a solutions guru like yourself that has set everything else up in the back end, right?
Yeah, that's exactly right. I mean, without something like this, it's a matter of HR goes, flags a new user in the system. They then have to open up a help desk ticket and say, please go get this user's account created, and so on, as opposed to now they just create them in the system, and that's it. Usually there's still a ticket that goes out, but even that we automate. And all that ticket says is get a laptop ready for this user. And so that's all IT really has to worry about is, go get this laptop, instead of create them a user account in these 20 different systems, and make sure that they know what their passwords are, and so on.
Now, do you think that's a shift that's happening in a lot of different environments? Have you seen that where Active Directory is not the main source of user data?
Yeah, I absolutely do. I've seen that more and more, and it's driven by a couple of things. There's, I guess I'd say there's a lot of newer companies, especially startups and so on, that are essentially going in an approach where they don't even have Active Directory at all. We have a few clients. Some of them have been around for as long as 5 or 10 years, and they just don't have AD at all. It's just does not exist. They started out without it. They're figuring out how to get through without it. Some of them have done stuff like adopted the Azure AD connections, so that they're just doing everything straight from the cloud. Don't have any type of on-prem AD. In other cases, it's a matter of we're a strong Mac shop, but we have enough other connections, so we don't have to worry about this stuff. But one of the challenges with AD is that it hasn't really scaled well into the I guess I'd say highly mobile world we live in now. If you can't talk to a domain controller, then you're kind of limited in terms of how much AD can really do once you've gotten GPOs pushed out and things like that. But nowadays, everyone is remote so much of the time that it's fairly limited in that regard. And you really don't want to put your domain controller to be internet accessible. Oh, please don't do that. Otherwise, you'll be calling us soon, I'm sure.
Definitely the IR team.
Yeah, exactly.
We'll get that phone call. But it comes back down to, in our kind of conversation, there are massive advantages to this SSO, right? But the security of it is, I think, it's great. It's super secure. And we came across a very unique situation recently. A user, they got locked out of SSO, right? And let's talk about the cause. The cause was not the fact that they themselves were entering in their SSO credentials incorrectly or what have you, right? Like, just like you said, SSO kind of pipes into all these other applications, such as, your email. And so the user X, will leave their name out of it, right? User X, all of a sudden comes and says, hey, I can't really access any of my apps. I don't know what the heck is going on. I got locked out of my SSO. And, with Ben and myself, we kind of dove into it a little bit and found that the cause was the email was constantly trying to authenticate. And that was the reason it was getting kicked out, right?
Yeah, it's a interesting situation. We've and to be real clear, it's not even all that unique within our organization. We've had over the last 2 or 3 years, we've had a couple dozen users that have gone through this exact scenario. And I don't know if it's one person doing it or if this has just become a real common tactic, but essentially what they're doing was that they were using, I don't know, a couple hundred different IP addresses, and they're essentially trying to brute force this user's password,
To their
but
email.
to their email. Yeah,
Yeah.
they're trying to attack Office 365. So I'm sure what it is that somebody went and checked our MX records or something, found out we're on Office 365, and then they're just scouring the internet for email addresses that are part of our domain, and then they're just trying to brute force those addresses. So essentially, the way it works with Office 365 when you're using SSO and you're federated is that it sends those requests to authenticate back to your SSO provider and has that handle it. So the request is going into Office 365, then coming out to our SSO, and because of that, the user was getting locked out. That it created some challenges because that the user wasn't logged in at the time. So because their account kept getting locked, there wasn't a way for them to go get into their account. We basically were either stuck in a race condition where it was a matter of this user, we're going to unlock it and say, okay, quick login right now before your account gets locked again. Or else it was a matter of you're just not going to be able to log in for right now until we can start blocking off some of this stuff. So it was a challenging situation and frustrating for the user, to say in the least. And frankly speaking, they're not the first one who've gone through this. And as far as I can tell, there was nothing that they could have done to affect or influence how this attack was going on either.
Yeah, and I know, and we were kind of talking, and what was it, Ben? I mean, within matter of minutes, picked up almost close to 300 different IPs coming in. So it's like, can you blacklist the entire internet? You
Yeah.
can't really, right? So
Well, and that's part of the challenge too, is that they're coming from all over the world. So the initial thought was, okay, if we block everything that's not coming from the US, then we'll be able to filter out 90% of these connections. Really not an ideal situation, but it is what it is. And that was where one of the challenges came in, was that our SSO platform currently, it doesn't evaluate the country blocking features until you are through the authentication process. So even though we're saying, for instance, this user can't log in from, let's just say Canada, if someone in Canada was still hammering on their account, they could still lock it out. So what we ended up having to do was essentially go in and create a block list for those 300 or so IPs, because the static list, when we had specific IPs we were blocking out, that is evaluated pre-authentication. So once that was in place, we unlocked the user's account and they were back in action again. But
it's kind of like
challenging.
kind of like putting a Band-Aid on it, right? Because all it takes is
Yeah.
like a new batch of brute forcing to happen or something. But
Yeah, we
Yeah,
actually get a lot
exactly.
of calls for that, and I try and tell them to basically do the same thing, but really there is no solution. You just kind of have to weather the storm, right? I mean, you
Yeah,
ban and reban when they change their IBs.
right. Well, and it's tough too, because for instance, gosh, when was that? That was a few days ago. And I don't know if they're still trying. I don't know if they are aware that they're blocked, because we don't necessarily get logs when someone tries to log in from one of those blocked IP addresses. So we're kind of blind, and I think that's one of the challenges that we're running into as we're transitioning to a more cloud-centric business world, is that some of the stuff that we could have done previously with traditional on-premise data centers and so on, we're a little bit blind to. And for instance, I could set up a rule in the firewall that says, yeah, we're going to block these IP addresses, but then take a log whenever this gets blocked. And because I don't have that type of functionality in the cloud, I'm kind of kind of in the dark in terms of exactly what's happening and why is it handling and how do we address this and so on.
Yeah, it's interesting. So yeah, if you don't have that visibility, you can't really update your defenses, right?
Yeah, and you're limited in exactly how you can go about doing that. I mean, for instance, Cash and I had talked about, what's more of an ultimate solution for this sort of thing. And we talked about, for instance, using client-based certificate authentication. So you can't even get to the authentication screen unless you're using a cert that's already trusted. Well, we can't do that with the cloud because they simply, there's lots of reasons. They don't want you to block yourselves out. They need to be able to, you need to be able to make that initial connection to get a cert issued. There's lots of reasons why they wouldn't want you to be able to do it that way. And there's just some limitations there. Whereas with, let's say something you're hosting on-prem, you could actually apply that as part of your web server configuration, is that the client cert has to meet these features, and then you're in and you're ready to go. But cloud hasn't really gotten there in that sense. So in some regards, we're having to go back and reinvent a lot of the features that were built out years and years ago to allow us to support more advanced features and use cases.
Yeah, I was having a conversation over the weekend with a fellow tech buddy about this situation. I was saying, hey, this is SSO, and this quick question was, well, if the SSO, gets locked out at 5, bad attempts, couldn't you just have the, other services lock out sooner than that, to avoid, the thing constantly pushing to SSO? Like if the email locks out after 3 failed attempts and SSO locks out after 5, it'll never even go past the 3. And I'm like, it sounds like a good idea, but then again, let me ask the guru: is that a possible solution?
No, it definitely is. And there's other ways to go about it too. For instance, another thing that we could do would be to go into Office 365 and set up Office 365 to just block those attempts. And so that would be another approach. Of course, if they know that they need to go around Office 365, then they could do that. But for this one attacker, I'm assuming it's one attacker, they seem to have a fairly common MO. So I don't know that they would change gears and decide they're gonna try to bypass it. I think they're probably doing more of a spray type attack with against lots and lots of different folks that are all going through Office 365. But yeah, that would be an option too. The hard, or the challenge there is that our SSO platform doesn't support those type of lockout mechanisms. So like for instance, it's stopping folks from getting locked out of AD, but it wouldn't be able to just lock them out of one app as opposed to locking them out of multiple apps.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting. I guess there's a lot that goes into it, because I was thinking, we had this combo is like, if you really wanted to just, scale it back and, don't really do anything crafty and heavy, it's all you really have to do is get a company's full email list and blast all of them constantly, wait for the
it's
users.
kind of a denial of service attack.
Yeah, and it's a simple way of doing a denial of service. Anybody can do it,
Yeah, and that's a that would be a serious concern. I think,
don't try this at home, kids, by the way.
Oh yeah, seriously, please don't.
All theory.
Yeah, well, and it would be a fairly large scale enterprise, because you'd have to have a large enough of IP base so that you're not getting IP banned. You'd have to go after lots and lots of different accounts. You'd have to go after them, or each account, frequently enough that they're getting locked out before the user can get logged back in. But I think that in some regards, this also points us back to the real issue, which is the password. I mean, if it wasn't,
I was just about to ask this.
yeah, if we're not using passwords for authentication, then this whole thing just goes away. I mean, you're not going to try to brute force my certificate or my a push to my mobile phone or something. It's just kind of uncalled for.
Yeah, and speaking of passwords, I read that Microsoft, for the past couple of years, internally they've been getting rid of passwords, and their goal is to just completely eradicate it by the end of this year.
Yeah, and there's a lot of challenges with that. For instance, I was talking to a client about this earlier today, where, for instance, they're trying to go into more of an approach where they want to remove password expiration and just make passwords like 15 plus characters or something. And the issues they're running into when they're trying to deploy some of these more advanced, I guess I'd say, next gen approaches, if you'll excuse the overused term, is a couple. Number one, you're frankly speaking running into a lot of challenges where folks are saying, how is my risk lower if I'm removing a password? So there's a lot of obstacles there. But the other obstacle we run into, and this is generally tends to be the more serious one, is just trying to get through compliance. Like in their case, they had issues with HIPAA and high trust, where all of a sudden it was like, well, now we won't be able to meet that requirement, or PCI. And you could say with PCI, okay, we have a compensating control where our passwords all have to be 15 characters or something, and therefore we don't rotate. And in some regards, up to your QSA if that's adequate or not. So there's still a lot of pushback when trying to pick up some of these revolutionary and kind of cutting edge approaches around the password. There's still just a lot there.
Yeah, and a slow response too. Like,
Yeah.
NIST changed those requirements. I think at least a year ago, maybe more, 2 years ago, maybe. And PCI, that's not going to change anytime soon. They're still doing the rotations, and all that stuff. So, which was a NIST requirement change at least a year ago, as far as I know.
Yeah, and I think with a lot of these standards, it's taken them a while to change because it takes them a while to get enough quantifiable data to prove that this is really a reduction in risk. So, as I understand, I wasn't involved in the process, but as I understand, the original version of PCI, when they first developed it, was essentially them looking at all the credit card breaches they had had in the past and saying, okay, what was the cause? What could have been done to prevent this? Let's go make that a requirement now, as well as some actual, industry and human intelligence, where they're actually asking folks, okay, what else should we have in here that we might have missed at first blush, or does this all make sense, or is this silly? Whereas if all of a sudden we go in a direction where, yeah, we're not requiring passwords at all, or we're just requiring super strong passwords that never expire, it takes a while to get to the point where you say, okay, it's been 5 years, and we have 10% of our user population that's taking this approach, and breaches have been lower for those organizations than others. And so, and not to mention, there's other standards. Like, well, one of the challenges to high trust is that it's kind of like SOX, Sarbanes-Oxley, where it was essentially developed at some level by politicians and lawyers, which means it's going to take a little while for all of that to catch up as well, and for somebody to propose the idea, and then enough other people to say, this is a good idea, let's go with it.
Yeah, easier said than done, I guess, right? Especially when it comes into that realm of the world.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it's a big ship to turn. I mean, it takes a while to get it moving around. So there's definitely some challenges there.
Well, I'm all for it.
Yeah.
I mean,
I hate that I have to rotate my password every 90 days.
Yeah, what was one that we actually came across, Matt, recently, where the password hadn't been rotated in how long? It was like,
so you're reading the dashboard and it said 90, and I was like, oh, that's not bad, I guess, 90 days. And no, the increment was in months, so it hadn't been changed in 90 months.
My favorite was I was talking to, I can't remember how it came up, whether it was someone who just told me what they did, or if if we came across their password in something. But it was like their password was something to the effect of January with a capital J 2021 exclamation mark. And it was like, okay, I think I know when this, yeah, I think I know when this password was last changed. And you know, at this point, it's probably April 2021 exclamation mark. So
right. Yeah, I think Kevin from the threat team was telling a story one time where they got into an environment and they were able to dump some passwords, but the passwords weren't working, but they could see what the password was. And it was like, you know, baseball February 2019 or whatever, right? And then so then he just started trying, you know, April, March, May until he finally got it to work. And it was that's all they were doing was just changing the months. So.
Yep.
Or winter, I think was one of them too. Kevin was saying he saw like the last change date was like in the summer, so then he changed it to winter and it worked. So that's what happens though. Those rotations, they create weak passwords, in my opinion, you know.
Yeah, I think so too.
And with the combination of multi-factor, you know, MFA, and you have a strong password, like I don't need to rotate my password. Like my last pass, and I'll fully confess this on podcast for all 4 of you to hear. My last password has been the same password for the last, I don't know, 8 years. And I'm not worried about it because I have multi-factor.
Yeah. So, yeah, I can't remember when I last rotated that.
SIM swapping, it's all over, man.
Well, no, but I use I don't use my cell phone.
Oh, okay. Fair enough. Hold on. I have nothing.
Yeah, actually I have a YubiKey. So
that's
yeah,
if you get my YubiKey, then you're good.
SMS is a whole other issue. We actually had one guy on my team that wanted to experiment with for some of this exact reason with switching the order of authentication. So it was let's challenge for second factor first, and then let's do password afterwards, so that we can cut some of this stuff down. And the issue that we were running into was that the client that they were trying this with in a pilot capacity, they had a factor that worked with a push to the user's mobile device. And so whenever someone all of a sudden tried to brute force their account, that instead of just that user's account getting locked out, instead it was just a pop-up every 30 seconds on their phone saying, "Is this you or not?" Yeah, it was like, oh, okay, well, I'm not sure this is working out quite the way that we think.
That's so funny because I was like, yeah, why don't we do multi-factor first, and then you bring up the one example of why we don't.
Well, I mean, I guess on the other side of it, you'll definitely know if you're getting hacked really fast, right? Or you're trying to get hacked.
Yeah, well, and that's one of the things that I saw too is for instance, like with those pop-ups, the notifications on the phone. I think those are great because they're super convenient. I mean, it's hard to find. Well, it's kind of become a joke on our team that whenever there's a problem with MFA, it's probably because there's like a VP in the company that doesn't want to pull their cell phone out and go get their OTP out of it and type it in and so on. But it's like with the notifications, it's, you know, one tap and you're done.
Right.
But we actually have one of our technology partners. They've developed a new push function for their MFA offering. That what it does is it is first you get the pop-up on your phone saying, "Is this you? Yes or no?" And when you tell it yes, it says, "Okay, here is your secret response," and it's like a 2-digit number. And then back on the web browser where you're trying to log in, it'll say, okay, which of these 3 options is that 2-digit number that you're seeing on your mobile device? So there's no way to, for instance, you're not at work, you're done working for the day, you leave, all of a sudden you get a notification on your phone and muscle memory just goes, okay, I say yes when I get this and I move on. Instead, it's a matter of, yeah, I said yes, but then I actually have to know what this is, and so the person that initiated it still can't use that to compromise your account.
Yeah,
it's kind of a neat thing. Yeah, it's kind of a neat thing. I'm not sure how many compromises that really would prevent, but it's a neat idea though.
I've heard some pretty crazy ideas in the multi-factor realm. One company that I know of is working on a compass type feature. I'm not really sure how that's going to work out, but basically you spin in your seat and you point north or you point south. So we'll see how that one plays out.
Yeah, I heard about that one. I'm strongly skeptical to it because I don't know about you, but I feel like the GPS in my phone is not quite reliable enough for that sort of thing. Plus,
Well, there's that for sure. But I mean, just like the example you gave where the VP didn't really want to go to his bag to get his phone. I don't think a VP is really going to want to spin in his chair either. So we'll see. We'll see. But yeah, some interesting stuff. It's definitely going to be interesting to see what comes out in the next year or even years. But I definitely, in my opinion, think that passwords are probably going to go away and we're going to have something else. I don't know, whatever the government wants to put in us, RFID chips. In our palms or something.
Yeah, and that's one of the things too. Since you brought up the government, yeah, here you go. That can work.
There we go. There we go.
I did it in jest, but that's fine. Go ahead.
I strongly feel like the federal government needs to make some changes to the whole something method of authentication that we use for a lot of our federal government interactions and a lot of our financial interactions. Like for instance, let's take the value out of finding out someone's social security number by not using that as a secret value. Let's use something else, or let's switch over to something you have, like showing your driver's license or something else like that.
Yeah. When I was in college, our password for everything was our social security number.
Yeah.
So at least we've come from that. At least we've moved on from that.
Yeah. When I first graduated from high school, I actually was hired by my college to help them work with the online classes, and the mechanism that they used in those days, I did a lot of work with them on security, but the mechanism they used in those days was that everyone's username was their first initial of their first name, their last initial of their last name, and then the last four of their social. That was your username.
Oh, wow.
And then your password was the first 5 of your social followed by your first name. So, and of course, every time somebody called into,
so you're like, what oh no, that's your whole social.
Yeah, that was a whole social.
Yeah.
And so, well, and the thing a lot of people don't realize is how social security numbers are generated. So the first, the first 3 is based on where you were born, who issued it. The second, or the next 2 are based on the batch number. And then the last 4 are actually globally unique. They're just randomly given out, essentially. So if you knew somebody's usernames, like for instance, somebody calls the help desk, or even the usernames weren't even secret because you could see other users' usernames inside of the online classroom system. If you found out where they were born and
you do some OSINT, you could easily figure that out.
yeah, you can find out what the location ID is. Now you got your first 3.
Wow.
And then based on the year, you should be able to find out what the batch ID is, and then you've got your next 2. And so suddenly you have that whole person's social. You could, and it was like at the very least that person can now log in to the online classes because they now know enough about you.
Wow, that's amazing.
And I'm just going out. I'm sure that it was for sure stored in plain text somewhere too. Just that.
Yeah. Well, it was a username, so that like the unique part was stored in plain text for sure.
Yeah. The really sensitive part was
That's funny. There was a talk a couple years ago, kind of related to this, but talking about OSINT and things you can do online, and it was at DEF CON. Gosh, I want to say like 6 years ago. But this guy, I think it was in Australia or it wasn't the United States, but in other countries, he figured out a way to not only kill people off digitally, right? He could register it as a coroner. There was no like hoops that he had to jump through. He just basically had to fill out some forms and he became a coroner, and then he would sign death certificates.
What?
He also figured out that you can digitally create people. Which I'm sure that loophole's been used a few times.
Wow.
So, yeah. I forget the guy's talk, but let me do some quick Google foo here. But it was pretty amazing. It was one of the coolest talks I've ever heard at DEF CON.
Yeah, that's like some next level identity theft
Yeah,
stuff right there.
sign up to become a quarter. That's interesting. I mean, you could do a lot of damage with that. A
Oh
lot.
yeah, I mean, remember
Yeah.
Shawshank Redemption? Remember
Oh
that movie?
yeah. Of course.
Where he
Best
talks
film.
about creating the fake identity, and like the only person that knows who this person is him, and all the signatures are him. So he just has to pretend he's that person when he goes to the bank and gets all the money out.
Yeah, I remember that.
Spoiler alert, when he breaks out of prison. Sorry if you haven't seen that movie in the last 2 decades or whatever.
At
You
this
have not
point,
watched
you had your
Shawshank.
chance.
Yeah, you
Right?
had
It's
your
like
chance.
on TBS every other Wednesday.
I swear they play it in Christmas time too. It's just that big of a family favorite.
It is a great movie, but yeah, it's pretty interesting. So anyway, I don't know. Sorry, we got on that topic. We could spend another 30 minutes talking about that.
Yeah. Yeah, that's another interesting thing that's been going on a lot more in identity too, is the whole identity proofing idea and how you do that. The if you're not familiar with identity proofing, or maybe don't know by this name, the idea behind it is how do we tell that the person that is assigned to this account and has access to it is actually the person this account represents.
Yes.
So like, for instance, you go and you sign up for a Facebook account. How do we know this is actually you, and you're not actually just pretending to be this person and happen to have some photos of them or something else like that? So it's been interesting to kind of see that whole process evolve, because, for instance, a lot of them are using I don't know, I'd say public sources of data, but semi-private sources of data, like the TransUnion database to pull out stuff, or looking at past residential records and that sort of thing. And a lot of this is stuff that you can go spend $5 on some random person lookup website online and get a lot of this data out of it.
Yeah.
So we're going through a weird thing where it's like, how secure is this really?
Right.
So
Yeah, no, I mean, a couple apps nowadays that I've tried signing up for, they try to make you like snap a live picture of yourself
yeah.
in some kind of weird gesture, like a hand above your head or something awkward, right?
Really?
Yeah, and you send it, and then within X seconds, it'll say like, okay, account verified. Right. But then I thought about it, I'm like, well, it's not that hard to Photoshop my anybody's face with their hand above their head and send that in, So I don't know how it's really authenticating it there, but I'm sure hopefully there's a more advanced, mechanism on the back end. But
Yeah,
so real
and
quick.
that's-
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say that's another thing that we've seen too, is companies employing the idea of turn on your webcam, let's snap a picture of you, now hold your driver's license up to it. Okay, cool. This looks like the same person. But I mean, how much longer can that really be reasonable? I mean, look at like what's happened with like deep fakes over the last few years.
yeah.
As a guy who made fake IDs in high school, I can tell you it'd be pretty easy to make a fake driver's license over a webcam.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. I mean, all the protections on those things are really designed so that you can look at it face to face.
Yeah, exactly. Like UV light and all that stuff.
I'll tell you, the best guys at detecting fake IDs are those bouncers at nightclubs, man. Nothing gets by those guys.
Those guys are good, man. I was not an ID, but I was just walking up to go talk to a friend who was already in the club in Vegas. I didn't even try to get in, and the bouncer was like, "No knives," and I was like, "What?" And he points at my pocket, and he could see my pocket knife. I was like, "Dang, dude!"
He probably just looked. He's like, "This guy's a knife for sure. This guy for sure has a."
But I was gonna say that speaking of Vegas, that talk was at DEF CON 23 in Vegas, or that's only where DEF CON's only in Vegas. I'm retarded. Anyways, it was in 2015. It was by a guy named Chris Rock, who does not look like Chris Rock, but he's an identity master. So I'm just gonna go ahead and take his word for it. And then the talk was called "I Will Kill You." He talks about how you could basically con life insurance and kill people and create people. So
Now that is a DEF CON ready title if I've ever heard one.
Yeah, for sure. For sure.
I think he did another one on how to overthrow a government. Yeah. So he's definitely on some watch lists for sure.
Well, just to kind of bring it back to where we started about SSO, Ben, is there any light at the end of the tunnel? Do you see the, service providers, solution providers actually trying to come around with solutions to protect, account lockouts so guys like us don't have to really get creative and go through loopholes to try to fix it? But what can we look forward to here?
Yeah, we're definitely seeing a lot there. We're seeing the solutions evolving pretty quickly. Whether it's, for instance, the organizations implementing their own dynamic block lists. So we're seeing this IP address being used for some type of password spray attack. Therefore, let's start blocking it proactively. It's definitely an evolution process. We're seeing more and more these solutions are stepping up, both cloud-based solutions and SSO in general. The challenge for them is that, like every development company in the world, they're resource constraints. They're having to really focus on the urgent, high priority stuff first, and then figure out some of the other stuff later on. So it's hard to know exactly where on the list this one user getting locked out for a day really sits on their overall hierarchy. But yeah, I would definitely say we're seeing a lot more focus in that regard, and a lot more companies starting to develop things for it. And part of the challenge is that it's I guess I'm not speaking directly to this one particular instance, because there's still it's still an arms race in a lot of regards, because they're, as soon as they put in measures to prevent this exact attack, they'll come up with a new one that will take new measures to get blocked off. But one of the other approaches that would be strongly appreciated would be if implementing some solid out of band administration functions. So, for instance, being able to implement like circuit-based auth. One of the reasons why a lot of cloud providers haven't done that sort of thing is because they don't want you to be able to accidentally lock out all of your admins. Well, if we can move the administrative side out of band to another access point, then that process becomes easier. If you lock everybody out, okay, no problem. You go log into the administrative console, which you haven't locked out right now, hopefully, and then you'll be able to go in there and change it back and get access back to what you have going on. So yeah, still a lot to be said for out of band authentication, and hopefully we'll see more and more of these functions showing up in cloud-based offerings.
Well, there you have it. So hopefully there is a little bit of a light at the end of the tunnel. It is an arms race. Hopefully we win. We'll never win, but
I don't think we'll ever win, but
yeah, we'll never win. But with experts like Ben, ourselves here, and IR, hopefully we can all collaboratively come up with the next best solution and try to stay ahead of the other side, right?
Absolutely. One day at a time.
My job is
One day at a time.
automated in the next 5 years. Okay.
Yeah, and worst case, as Matt likes to say, job security. So it's all good.
Yeah. Cool, very cool. Thanks, Ben. Thanks for going through all that. That's very cool.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Well, yeah, thanks, Ben. Thanks for stopping by. The 4 people who are still possibly listening to us, if you're still there, like, subscribe. We'll drop a link where you can find Ben. Any final shout out words, peace offerings for the fine gentlemen and ladies that are listening to us before we sign off?
Oh yeah, we always tell people that we'll send them stuff, but if you want to send us stuff,
yeah, you can send
we'll
us.
take that.
I'll drop my Bitcoin account. You guys can just
there you go.
send me money.
It's not gonna be worth anything soon, so just go ahead and just donate it to us. We'll take it. Take it off your
Just stay safe out there, folks.
Yeah.
Stay safe. And don't forget cycle passwords. If you don't have 2FA, get on that bandwagon. And if you're a company that's thinking about SSO, shameless plug, hit up Tevora, talk to Ben. And if you've already gotten hacked, you know where to call. Call me and Matt. We'll help you figure that out. But with that said, thanks everyone for your time. Ben, again, thanks for joining us. Matt, it's been real as always. And with that, I guess we'll talk next time.